Hi there everybody, Dave here from HeyUGuys, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Stefan Pape, and we are going to be talking about a brand new Sky Original TV show called Gangs of London. If you've not heard of Gangs of London, I think you will. I have a feeling this show is going to blow up in more ways than one, as we'll discuss in a moment. But yeah, as always, do write in the comments below if you've seen this show, if you like it, if you didn't like it, what you thought of it. Give us a subscribe and a thumbs up if you like this video. And as always, yeah, do participate because it makes it much more fun and interesting for us. And we love to hear your opinions too. So, Stefan, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Gangs of London is, what it's about, and some of the background around it?
Yeah, so I mean, well, firstly, in terms of background, I used to play a game on my PlayStation 2, I think, called Gangs of London, which I used to love. And it turns out this is actually a loose adaptation. So they're very loose in the sense that basically the kind of skeleton storyline to this is that all the different gangs of London, which is drawing in all the different kind of cultures of London from people from different ethnic backgrounds and from different sort of cultures, have all sort of come together, and they run London, the kind of underground version of London. You know, the drugs, the weapons, and the kind of criminal kind of underbelly of the capital is run by this select group of people that is very multicultural group of people. And the kind of head, Colm Meaney plays him, is kind of an Irish gangster, and he's killed in the sort of opening sort of few minutes, really. And then his son, Sean Wallace, kind of hothead who's following in his footsteps, played by Joe Cole, is out to find out who killed his dad, basically. And that's the kind of story. And it's all of the different kind of heads of all the different families and different kind of criminal organizations are reliant on a kind of rhythm to be in place. There's a kind of clockwork to all of the different gangs working together in unison, and they know that if the main gang sort of halts on all of the exports and imports and stuff like that, it's going to affect all of their businesses. So it's in their interests to find out who killed the top dog, and they've obviously got sort of Joe Cole's Sean Wallace heading up the investigation, and that's a kind of quite sort of not too intricately detailed sort of story, because I know obviously with TV series all it takes is to get to episode 2 and suddenly everything changes, and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but ultimately it's a hunt for the killers, or who ordered the kill of a huge criminal mastermind.
Absolutely, and we should say from the outset that this it's made by a production company called Pulse Films. Pulse Films had the rights from the computer game that Stefan mentioned, and they turned to the extremely capable hands of Gareth Evans. Now, Gareth Evans, you may not know his name, but you may know his work. He was writer, producer, and director of a film called The Raid and The Raid 2. And he basically made Iko Uwais a household name. Iko Uwais I'd never heard of him before The Raid, and this is Stefan chatting to them a few years ago. The sort of the best things about The Raid is just the fight choreography. I mean, obviously the entire films are just incredible as well, but the choreography around it is just exceptional, and that translates brilliantly into Gangs of London. Stefan, do you want to talk a bit about that and some what we see in the first couple of episodes?
Yeah, I mean, when you see Gareth Evans' name attached to something, you just hope you're going to see shades of The Raid in there, because The Raid was one of the most exciting debuts I've ever seen, and it sort of just changed the face of the kind of that sort of genre, and I just thought it was amazing. So to come to London, which is, if you think about this kind of subgenre, this is one that's mostly kind of popularized by the likes of Guy Ritchie and sort of filmmakers like that, where it's very much about dialogue, and it's quite cool, and it's about kind of like it's shootouts on near famous London landmarks and stuff like that. But what we don't really get is a kind of almost choreographed martial arts type kind of infusion into the London streets, and that's what Gareth Evans brings, and then some. I mean, the choreography and some of the scenes in episode 1. There's one big fight scene in this pub, and it's just a great sort of like dance like sequence where the way the camera kind of seamlessly moves from character to character, and there's just brutal violence going on around you, but it's almost poetic the way it's kind of put together. And I think for fans of the Raids who are following Gareth Evans' work, which I think a lot of people are, they'll be really pleased watching this to see him bring some of that kind of Indonesian kind of brutality that he sort of made so brilliant in the Raid and bring it onto the streets of London in a way we've never really seen before, I don't think.
No, I was going to say that. I think that I've never seen anything on TV like this show, other than maybe The Walking Dead in some of the seasons gone by, where the violence is. I mean, the violence in this show is something else. Like, if this show is not for the faint-hearted. If you're not a fan of violence and just outright brutality, do not watch this show. You will not like it. If you are,
literally in the first scene, someone gets set on fire, hanging off the building, and you go, okay, cool.
Yeah, that sets the tone, doesn't it? I mean, even that bar fight that you mentioned, it's like you're sort of caught up in the poetic, the ballet of the way that the scene is shot, but actually when you rip it apart, excuse the pun, I mean, it is brutal. Like you see things in Kingsman maybe where he gets an umbrella out and his bullets flying or things flying off it, and you think, that there's that level of sort of action violence and stuff, but this feels real. Like, I mean, so in later episodes some people's heads get shot off, for example. I mean, and they don't hold back. Like you see the head get shot off.
Is it still weird though that scene still made me miss the pubs being open? I'm not sure. I was still like, oh yeah, the good old days. No, but it's true. But I just think that I think Gareth Evans as well. I was just going to say, because talking about him coming from Indonesia and stuff, he where he obviously made the Raid, is that he doesn't know London very well, and I think that really serves this whole story in this TV series, because he almost comes at it from a foreigner's perspective, seeing London like a tourist might see London. And I think that makes London so beautiful and cinematic, because if I go to New York, I see New York in the way that Woody Allen made New York look in movies, that I see it with a kind of tourist's cinematic eye. And I think that Gareth Evans brings that vision to this, and London looks like a kind of a big stage, and I think there's no better place for this kind of choreographed fight sequences to take place than in front of a stage like that. And I think even though it's brutal, like you said, and even though it is quite harsh, I do think that it feels quite cinematic, which I think in some ways allows the brutality to flourish, because even though it's very real, at the same time it has a feeling of kind of melodrama, which I think is quite important and just takes away the sort of the naturalistic edge from it. But I do think that I think the depiction of London here, which obviously is important, it's in the title, is brilliant, and I think it works really well with the kind of brutality of the violence.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. If you haven't already seen it, Stefan actually got to chat with Gareth recently, was it last week, I think, about this exact show. So Gareth is a Welsh native who lived in Indonesia. I'm not entirely sure how he ended up there, but that's where he made the Raid 2, and to my knowledge he's now back in the UK making more films. So yeah, it was interesting, the interview. And we also got to chat with Joe Cole, who plays the lead, Sean Wallace, and it's sort of joint lead, isn't it? And we're not sure how to pronounce his co-leads, but it's Sope Dirisu, who is a name that we hadn't come across before, but I think you're going to hear a lot more from him in this show. I mean, in the choreographed fight sequences, I'm pretty sure it's him doing them. Like, it looks, unless they've got some very clever trickery and CG to change their faces, it looks like he's been doing these fight sequences. Must have taken forever to learn to do, because they are a ballet, they're a dance. And I think I'm a bit further into the show than Stefan is, and just like so the key point is the end of episode 2, which I think Stefan's watched recently, is just completely bonkers. And Gareth talked about that, didn't he, in your interview? And the end of episode 4, again, completely bonkers. There's not really any words to describe it, and I don't want to say what happens because it will spoil it.
Yeah, I think he looks great. He's got this kind of, like you said, it's not just the the choreographed fight sequences, which obviously required a lot of training and a lot of skill. But he's got that kind of the look and the face of a kind of weathered kind of protagonist, that kind of like lead detective you meet at the beginning of a TV series who stubs out a cigarette and sort of like knows they've got the whole world on their shoulders.
He looks like he's seen a few things, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He's got a great kind of really like televisual face, I think. And he's like I said, I've got to hold my hands up. I didn't know too much of his work before this program, but looking at his kind of IMDb and what he's got coming up and stuff, I think that hopefully Gangs of London will be the series that propels him, because for me, he's the standout in this series. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of good performances.
Oh, well, like the cast is exceptional. So Colm Meaney plays the dad, who we saw a photo of earlier. There he is. He doesn't last very long, but there's lots of flashbacks. So you get, if you're a fan of, back in the old Star Trek days, if you're a fan of Colm Meaney, then you won't be disappointed. The entire family are great, but the supporting cast is pretty big, isn't it? I mean, you've got, like you mentioned earlier, you've got the leaders of many of the different gangs and lots of different set pieces, you know, in country homes, and it goes on and on and on, and most of it is it's centered around just the brutality of the gangs and power struggles and how it all works. But do you want to mention Michelle Fairley's character, Stefan? Do you want to tell us a bit about her?
Yeah, so this is a great character, I think, and I think there's so often in these kind of big mobster kind of movies, I do think the wives of the gangsters and stuff are such fascinating characters, and I think often hold so much more power than I think the kind of history books would suggest. I think there was a film last year that came out which was all about the wives of the kind of mobsters, but I think it had a kind of comedic element, and the film wasn't so great. But it is an interesting territory, and she's got a kind of quiet resilience and a kind of quiet power to her, which I think is going to slowly build up and build up. And like we've said, I'm slightly behind you, but I think she's a really great character, and I think that it's very important in a program which is dominated by a very male cast. Let's not can't escape that, to have really almost very, very powerful Lady Macbeth type characters in there, the kind of traditional sort of almost Shakespearean roles. But she's a good actress, and I think I'm hoping to see much more of her as the series progresses. But her whole family as well is an interesting kind of lead family for this to run this show, because Joe Cole, I think, is great, and I think it's an interesting take to have him be very kind of wealthy and quite well-to-do in the way he speaks and
stuff.
He's
got a really posh accent, hasn't he?
Very posh accent, but that turns it on its head a bit. I think we're so used to the Guy Ritchie kind of Jason Statham lead role and things like this, and it's become a bit cliched. I actually think now that kind of Guy Ritchie take on London almost feels a bit kind of like a product of a bygone era. I think we feel like we've progressed beyond that, and now if we were to see a TV series of loads of gangsters walking around and shooting each other and pulling off sort of one-liners, I think it would almost feel a bit imitative. And I think the fact that he's got such a posh accent and clearly went to like private school and stuff, I think it gives the character a bit something different about him. And I think also, you know, there's that kind of idea that lead characters have nothing to lose. He's got everything to lose. And I think in some ways, because he's got so much money and so much power, and he's putting all of that in some ways on the line, it raises the stakes of the whole program. So I think it's really interesting what they've done with that character, actually.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, we could talk about this show for a long time, but I think, in a nutshell, if you like The Raid, you're going to love this show. If you didn't like The Raid because you thought it was too violent, you will not love this show. If you're just a fan of sort of that, a really well-made, good TV series that's really well written, really well produced, the choreography is exceptional, the acting is brilliant, and the story is just great, this is the one for you. I mean, it's on Sky, it's a Sky original, it's on Sky Atlantic, and all 9 episodes are there now, so you can binge the entire thing if you so want to. Although I think it's the sort of show you do actually need a bit of time just to like reflect on what you've just seen, rather than watching the one after the other. I'm not sure I could watch 9 episodes back to back, and they're all an hour long each as well. So I think the first episode is an hour and a half.
It's feature length, the first episode, isn't it? And then 8 more episodes of an hour each. So and I think Gareth, when he was originally approached, was asked to make a film, and decided actually this isn't a film, this is a TV show. So and has gone away and made it. And as I think you said in the interview with him, Stefan, it's as
much of a nightmare it is to be stuck indoors all the time. He talked about the fact that he was so fortunate that they'd finished making the show before COVID hit, and so they could do all the post-production or a lot of it, whilst they're all locked down at homes or in offices or wherever they're allowed to be. And so the show has made it onto Sky, and we are able to now watch it. So I guess thanks Pulse Films and to Sky and the other guys, Gareth and the team for getting this out there and unleashing it on the world. So in a nutshell, thumbs up, I think, from me. Stefan?
Yeah, for me, and I think don't be put off by the violence, in a sense that the Raid was very much like a video game, wasn't it? It was just violence, and I think if you don't like great violence, and if you don't like watching violence in movies, if you don't like watching fighting, there's not a lot else left of the Raid to kind of go to sort of grasp onto. Whereas I do think Gangs of London is about, like you said, power struggles and character development and stuff like that. And I think because of it being a TV series and having so much scope to flesh out this world, you don't. If you aren't a big fan of violence, if you've got a bit of a weak stomach in that regard, I do think there's a lot more about this that you will be able to take. I mean, Games of Thrones can be violent, but at the same time, that's about loads of families fighting. There's kind of weird similarities to Game of Thrones in some ways, I think, to this. And I think that there's enough in here that if you aren't into violence, despite it being really violent, you'll still enjoy it, I think. So it gets another thumbs up for me as well.
There we go. Fan. 2 thumbs up or 4 thumbs up. Do let us know in the comments once you've seen it what you think. As always, we will be giving movie reviews and these big TV show reviews as well. Let us know in the comments if you like it. Do subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Mouth Off when we review something else, hopefully just as good as Gangs of London. So take care, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed,
Nice.
Hey!